I promise it's going to be super quick. We've launched our 2026 summer camp. So it's going to be the last week of January in Uruguay, the in-person week. What's the summer camp? It's our most beloved event of the year. It's rooted here in Uruguay, in Montevideo, but we also go to other places in Uruguay. The idea is to bring our community, the video tech community, to collaborate, create, and celebrate. It's all about human connection and creativity and innovation and purpose. Um, we have two very different tracks. One of the summer projects, which are remote, 3 months long projects, and then we have the summer week here in Uruguay in person. Um, Probably you've heard about summer projects before. What we ask for is they're always open source projects, and the idea is that these are projects that have to make some impact in our community or industry. We've had several projects in the past, and what we ask for is for some industry sponsors or technical sponsor for the project. That means someone that's the product owner of the idea, and these are some of the projects we've done in the past. Of course, David last year with the BAS to SGAI conversion that we probably gonna mention today in our Mata talk, but also other summer campers like Casey and Alex and Luke Curley have had ideas in the past. So what we look for is tech sponsors to actually contribute ideas, and then contributors that want to, like after we've selected ideas, they want to actually contribute code. We do it collaboratively, like with weekly meetings and so. And if there are industry supporters, and that is someone that actually wants to use it to actually help like validate that the project makes any sense at all, that would be fantastic. So if like you can now pitch us your idea, and then we're going to shape the scope and build it together and share with the community what we built. And so you can take a snapshot of these if you want, because you can already submit your ideas, and we're going to be doing like, this is going to be the timelines. So we did like already like a call for proposals, and let's say by before Demuxed, we're going to be voting. The community is going to be voting, not us. It's going to be the community. And then right at Demuxed, our idea is to communicate what projects we're going to be working on. These are two projects. Qualabs sponsors a couple of engineers to work full time during those 3 months so that we can accelerate the projects. And then November, December, January, we're actually doing the code. And then we have these summer week in Uruguay. Many of you already been here. There are different tracks. You can do the contribute track and be part of the summer projects while you're here. You can do the tech track. They're like a conference, like tech talks, roundtables, lighting talks. There's a women empowerment program that actually Connie was a part of last year. And there's like a cultural track, which is more like sharing together activities as a community to share together. And you can actually get to kind of choose your own story, like which you want to be a part of. This year, we're going to have two special tracks, one for alumni, for people that have already been in Uruguay. We're going to do like different activities for them so that it's not boring. And we're going to have another like innovation track that we haven't yet promoted, but it's going to be out there at some point. So with all that said, what are we here for today? We're here to have our classic Mate Talks, which are roundtables. The idea with the Mate Talk, as it happens in our culture, is that when we're drinking mate in a round, anyone has the chance to speak. So it's not just David, Connie, Peter, Katie, or myself speaking, but any of you, feel free to unmute yourselves, speak up, comment, ask questions, bring your ideas. What we're looking for here with the Mate Talk is to actually, by the end, in 50 minutes when we leave, that we all have a, a, a better idea on this topic because we've shared and contributed and created knowledge through this collaboration. And our topic today is going to be the challenges in standardizing new video ad formats. And that's why we invited Katie Strout today from IB Tech Lab. Thank you, Katie. And just so you know, this is the very first Mate Talk in which we're co-hosting it with the SBTA University. Thanks to David and Shaiti. We all know that, maybe you don't, but David Hesson is now the Dean of the SBTA University. So we're helping and contributing content to the SBTAU that we can all share. So this is like a co-hosted event. So welcome, Katie. Um, I think I did some questions in the post, and we put some questions in like in the when we were announcing these. But let's say that maybe Katie, you want to intro yourself, what you do at IAB Tech Lab, and why like this was an important topic for yourself, and then we can kick off with some specific questions or conversation about it.
Sure. Thank you, Juan. Thanks for inviting me here today also. So I'm with IAB Tech Lab. I'm a senior product manager there, and I work in kind of all things video. I also work with podcasts, and we've called our group, it's the Advanced TV Working Group. And so over the last couple of years, we get questions like, how can I get this nonlinear to serve to CTV? I'm having trouble with the DSP when it comes to CTV inventory or whatever it is. And what it came down to is we launched what we called the CTV ad format hero initiative last fall, in which we made a call out to the industry. We said, send us your formats, the ones that you're using, the ones that seem to be successful, the ones that you want to see standardized. So we got over 100 submissions, and we distilled that down into 8 different formats. And we're currently trying to standardize what is the shape and form and behavior of those different formats, so that we can get those out there. And what we're finding as we go about doing this is that standards are absolutely the way to start, but there is more to think about than just the standards themselves, and that is how to surface the inventory for, say, nonlinear ads, provide those signals, and make sure the SSPs and the DSPs are aligned on what signals are needed, and how do we get that in there programmatically. Right now, the way to work with like nonlinears and squeeze backs, L bars, pause ads, all of that is done through direct sales. So you can do that through direct sales. That's how you see the pause ads on your TV right now. But we're looking at how can we scale that? Because if I want to do a pause ad with Netflix and Disney and Amazon, I have to go and work with each one of those businesses individually. That, as we know, that doesn't scale. So how can we make it available to? How can I create a pause ad and then just serve it to any entity that I want, doing that programmatically via bidding or whatever that is. So that's how we got to where we are today, and we are just about entering strategic planning for 2026, and I think there's a lot of work to do around building this ecosystem that enables these ad formats. And so I come today with as many questions as, well, not really answers, but that's kind of what I'd love to talk to about today. What are your challenges? What are you seeing? What questions do you have?
Thanks, Katie. That's fantastic. And I've added to our panel Connie, David, and Peter. I'm pretty sure you can all comment on that, but also on the audience. Many of you are working on these challenges too, so feel free to jump in if you want. So I don't know, maybe David, if you want to comment on it.
But yeah, I mean, there's an interesting issue of there's a lot of steps that take place in the whole ad workflows, as Kate's talking about, like buying, how that kind of goes through the flow of the system, how it needs to be, generated into a data format that they can then be utilized by these, both the ad systems as well as the playouts and so forth, and then also down all the way to the player. And how does this stuff need to get signaled? And ultimately, like just in early talks with IAB and also Sketty and so forth, like there's different parts and different organizations all working on different standards that all relate and all need to connect to each other, but they all need to cover different functionality. And I think one of the interesting challenges is like, well, you could cover things in different places, and it could be done in one way this way and done another way this way, and it could be upstream or downstream. And that's one of the things that poses a challenge as we have innovation within the space and new technology and new routes that we want to take is how and where to do it. And the downside of standards that can happen is like, cool, well, yeah, we want to do something kind of cool and kind of different. So that standard doesn't really pertain, or we now have the standard that I'm going to use it as a guideline, but I'm just going to kind of do my own thing with it. And is that good or is that bad? That's kind of the norm, and I don't think that's bad, but those are some of the challenges that we have. And I still think that, how we can find good collaboration across these different channels to come up with this type of solutions, and deal with how when we disagree on where things should happen, what we're going to do about that, because that's one of the big things that we're seeing is as things get more complicated, there's a lot more options, and more options, it makes things harder for standards and over customizing.
Right. And so, one of the really exciting things about talking to this group is that in CTV, your ad calls and placement are handled more by the player than they are like in web and mobile. Those we're fairly used to sending ad requests and response using OpenRTB and VAST and whatnot. But when you go to CTV, it's coming from the player and it's using different markers like SCUDdy and maybe ATS C3 or it's got a different marker for where that ad comes in there. So the inventory is there, um, from what I understand, but the buy side doesn't know. It's kind of like hidden from them. It's not being surfaced in DSPs or SSPs because it's different signals. It's not just like openly available. So part of kind of setting up this ecosystem is working with the DSPs and SSPs and especially the players on to how to send those signals, how to make them available in the markets where people are used to looking for that inventory. And
And
then
that,
and then and then beyond making that request, how to execute it then in the player in a standard way. And yeah, sorry, David, go ahead.
No, and I'm saying that, I mean, there's also quite big differences there between live and VOD too. Like, great, hey, if you're doing VOD, yeah, we can detail how all these things are signaled and what they're going to look like and when and what we want where. With live, sometimes that's a moving target at best. Um,
Right. And
and
what live means
Mhm.
is a lot of different things, right? Live, when I changed my working group from digital video to advanced TV, one of the big differences that is not overtly obvious is that on demand is different from what we call live. There's live meaning it's scheduled programming. People watch that content at the same time as it's made available, and the ad breaks are at the same time. Everybody sees the ad break at the same time, and we're trying to get to not only will they see the ad break at the same time, but can they see different ads that are relevant to them versus everybody seeing the same ad? How do we
Personalization. Yeah.
right personalization, targeting, addressability, right? And it doesn't always click with people that scheduled programming, it's just signaled, it's different. You have to have very specific durations for your ads, and they can't be like in on demand. You go to a YouTube video or whatever, you can get an ad and you can interact with it. The content can be paused for an an amount of time that's not set, right? And you can continue to interact with that, or you can skip it and move on to the next ad. But in scheduled programming in live, that's not the case. We have a very set time limit for that.
Mhm.
And then live is scheduled programming, but it also is live event, like streaming a, a sports game or an awards show, like in real time. The difference there is that everybody's still going to see the ad break at the same time, but we don't know where that ad break is going to be. It comes like there's an injury on the field, right? Let's go to break. So, so those are challenges not really even there in on demand. It is very different.
Cool. So we have people here in the audience that I think has figured part of these out, or at least are experiencing these challenges. And I'm seeing you, Zach. Um, uh, Probably also, well, Todd was around. Not sure if he's still there, but I guess the OptiView teams experience some of those challenges and maybe others. I don't know if you want to comment on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, first the first layer of personalization, right? Bringing that into a live experience, that was a big and hard goal. We first tried it in 2018. Uh, the in really getting into it, like the more that we were able to disrupt and move the concepts of the ad resolution independent of the actual stream playout, right? That's where we ended up getting the best bit. As we look at something like interactive between VOD and live, but specifically in the CTV space, where we've tripped a lot in the past, in the I would say is like we tried to treat the CTV space, and when I say we, the industry as a whole, like we treat the web browser, where you can run arbitrary things and that you can have all the resources you want, and that is very, very, very much not the case. And
Right.
so as we think about standardization, the more that we can standardize less on go integrate this library or go integrate these JavaScripts or go integrate these runtimes, and the more that it can be built on, rendering common assets and descriptive text and things like that. Um, I think we end up solving a lot more of these aspects, especially in live. When you think about a common challenge we saw was as we brought in interactives into live creatives, even in the on-demand case, um, the content running at 60 FPS or uh, uh, it ends up being a lot more stressful on the decode of the client. And so you got to be very, very efficient about what you're doing and making sure that you're not hogging the render or decode threads a lot of the times.
That's that echoes a lot of what we're seeing in our groups too. Right? People, they look at a TV and it's like a giant iPad, right? You should be able to serve to it the same way you do in a mobile device, but that is, as you noticed, it's not the case. It's different inventory, it's signal different. And then when you get down to that rendering, right, the FPS values of that, um, those are all things that as we're standardizing these ad formats, we want to be able to express that. What would be an ideal FPS of that kind of format to submit? And how do you signal whether or not, like, if you're watching a movie or your favorite sitcom, right? That's not really a place where you want to see a nonlinear ad. But on the other hand, if you're watching your sports content or a cooking show, and you want to be able to, if an advertiser wants to surface an ad for how you can go and, in some cases, purchase the ingredients or the tools, the cookware, right there on the spot. That's possible today with interactive ads, and yet it's a lot harder to do in CTV just because those signals, the rendering, the interactive, how do you execute that interactive ad in the player? And so those are the kinds of things that we're looking to standardize on.
Well, in your perfect world, Katie, what would you want that you don't have today that the player's content preparation, right? Where the signals are going to be injected. What is your dream and that could be made a reality to make things better?
Well, the dream, it's not one thing, it's a mix of things. It's everybody working together. It's an ecosystem, right? And that's something that I'm trying to define with my group. What roles are involved, and what is their part in getting this ad on there? Because it's not just one entity. There's the producer, there's the execution of it. So in terms of the player, if the player just knew how to execute an ad, like let's say an L bar where the content shrinks to a corner to a given size, and then the leftover space is it's an L shape, and the ad is displayed there. If I were able to send an ad and say this is an L bar, and we know what the standard is for that, the player has the tools that it needs to execute it, without me having to work directly with that distributor or that app, right? I want to be able to send this L bar ad to any one of 15 different inventory suppliers, whether that be the networks or the apps, the streamers. How do we make that happen?
So Katie, if I get you right, what you say is missing is for the entire like end-to-end chain from the advertiser, the ad producer, the agency, and also the uh the distributor, or like whatever the distribution is. Like there should be an end-to-end way, an agreed way of the interoperable signaling, and a clear reference or on what's available for display and how to do it.
Yeah, and I know it's not like it's not one thing, and yet it's that's what's needed. That's what's needed to happen.
But you're also
And I
going
think
to
the
have
signaling.
go for it.
Go for it, Jake.
No, no.
So, I mean, the signaling I think is easy to define and align in the specification type of realm. To me, I see the biggest challenge becomes is then on the rendering. Like, hey, you said I want to be able to send it to whatever device, and it's going to look the way it's supposed to look, sized, positioned, beautiful. Oh, yay! That sounds simple. I wish it was. But the challenge there is like there's so many different players, right? Everyone people can make their own players still every day. And then we can define specs for how those should be rendered, but so much complexity comes in there, and just the reality of like they just take forever, or don't end up adopting this type of thing, or they adopt it only when there's the need, is one of the big challenges with that. And even then, there's certain platform limitations, right? Roku and a single video rendering surface, or older TVs versus newer TVs, and the very differences at what we can support in each one of those. When it comes down to the player, there's so much variation on the device, the hardware, then the software as well. That's the big hurdle, and I'm not saying it's not worthy fight and that we can't and shouldn't move forward with that. Part of it is, yeah, creating these specifications and making it clear that by saying L layout, this is what it means, this is how it should be laid out and rendered, and how things should be stacked, and how we control audio and these other factors that come with that. And that's what I think we're working on between SCTA, between IAB, and trying to bring this stuff together. But there's the adoption is going to be the tricky part, right? Because the greatest specifications in the world don't make a difference if no one actually implements them.
Yeah, I see Nicolas's hand up, and I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank
Hello
you.
again.
Hello again. Yeah, I love the point to like we have worked, for example, with Alex Gilari a lot, building like, hey, let's build for Dash.js a prototype with overlays. So you can put an overlay. It could be like a L shape to put L shape content, to put a side by side with a background or whatever. And what I found that was really like after I heard it was so obvious, is like that's too much freedom to do whatever you want. So how do you specify how if I'm someone who is building an ad, what's the size for that L shape? So that's an issue, and I prefer to have something that 5 people just adopt it, that don't have anything and have like a wild size over the catalogs, so no one can use nothing. Even I think we have to think about cases that, for example, for connected TVs, where yeah, the best experience I would like to have for an ad yeah, it's an L shape that the part of the L shape, it's also a video with animation and all the things you want. But sometimes we don't have like dual decoders and things like that. So we should also think about like what's the we want to monetize. So what's the you know the I don't have the word, the uh, plan B if you cannot put another video. Like, okay, there is a GIF or there is an image or there is a whatever else, but I would like to see like a standard that understand that this is best case. Like, yeah, this is the video. I want the L shape. We have like rules. Oh, I have Clementina here. Sorry. We have clear rules about the size, everything, our and even effects. Because someone was going to say, "Oh, I want the player to shrink," and it's not like one thing that just boom shows and goes off. I would like to see some effects. We should also take that into account, and I prefer something than nothing. And then also like, yeah, the plan B if the device cannot do something, so someone can render all those creatives and have that library and say, okay, I have a library that can play to in any player that follows these rules, this standard or whatever. And if you don't like it, I hope like industry start taking the standard, and then you are the one in the you're going to be pushed to use it. But we
Well,
have
We
one
had
that's
a really,
champion, one big company, one champion that says this is the standard I'm going to use.
that is
we
a
had a
really
really
good
good.
point. One thing we're trying to address in the working group for defining these standards is let's take for example the L-shaped ads. We all advertisers want the biggest bang for their buck. They are and even streamers want to be able to provide a unique and elaborate offering, right? I want to be able to allow for video in this L bar. But to that point, it's kind of like the lowest common denominator. What's going to be the easiest to execute and display? And that would be like an underlay, an L-shaped ad with no video. But in order to satisfy those that want to be able to offer that, maybe there is a sort of plan B. Maybe in the guidance, it's like build it like this, but have a backup for when that one doesn't work, when that one's not accepted. And and then beyond that, we need to know what is accepted. What is this player capable of doing? And
And
so
I think
even if
So,
oh, sorry.
I was just
so
going
one
to
thing.
add that if with the execution player, right, everybody's going to build the player the way they want to, but to have like a standard basic set of commands that everybody can work with in their own proprietary setup, I think is that yeah, go ahead.
That really brings up the question though, is like when do we need full customization or not? Like we had a great discussion at the SVTA meeting around like, great, well, we can start to try to template this with some level of customization. You can adjust things, right? To cover these kind of nonlinear experiences so that we have kind of a set thing. Because if you try to do everything's kind of open, you can do whatever you want and still try to have a standard around it becomes very unwieldy, right? And the question there that I have that so great, we can define this, we can do that, but is it going to be enough? So like Connie and Zach and Peter, like, hey, if we're talking about nonlinear ads, like I want to do an L or I want to do an overlay ad where I have a video ad on top of my other ad, and there's a little bit of customization. You can adjust a little bit of the sizing or a little bit of the position, but not complete freeform. But it's a standard way to do that. Is that going to still be achieving enough when you guys have very tight control on brand display and what's going on? Or is it no, we want full creative control, period, and we're not going to sacrifice that if we're going to go forward with any type of technology?
It's a good question. I mean, it's also coming from an interesting state of we've explored and done a lot of the in first party kind of creative rendering interactions as well as third party. And what we found in a direct sales engagement is that there's a lot of that tailoring, that uniqueness that you can bring to brands and bring to buyers um, that doesn't have to be done at the client. So like a lot about how they want that L to look or the shape or the overlay or take over. If you can do a lot via flat packing of that creative or flat packing of that experience and enablement while still getting high levels of uniqueness into the device experience that's ultimately consumed by the consumer. And so then you get this interesting trade-off where the standard itself might be the templates in kind of a basic layout, and maybe some like inflatable interactive. The example that always comes to my head is back in like 2010, there was a Toyota truck that would like pull the ad across the screen or something on websites, right? Like maybe like some small level of like interactivity, but then you degrade to just that base state across the vast majority of devices that don't have the power. That gets you enough. It gets you pretty far away beyond the basics of just here's a linear creative that's playing, and maybe the user's watching or maybe they've left the room. Uh,
Right. So does it work? Does it work then to, so there's a way of providing a set of basic commands that says expand, and then you can have the option of like sizes, right? Width and height or percentages, right? Versus here's an L bar. To execute it, we all know it shrinks to say 60% of the screen in the upper right corner. And because that's all specified, it's just kind of like execute as specified. And I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of both, like standard L bar execution, shrink to 60%, and L bar is available. With the option of no, shrink to these dimensions that I send. I mean, what's the difference in that? Is it easier to provide like those coordinates to shrinking to what sizes and how to do that? Or is it easier to say L bar execution go?
Yeah, it's great. It's a good question, and I would actually take it to the other side of like the ad creative, which we haven't really talked about, which is like compliance measurement. Right. When you think about being able to specify arbitrary data, like, yes, you generally believe in good actors and whatnot. Um, but in allowing to specify arbitrary, it becomes harder to also ensure experience constraints. So, like, you might have a piece of content that says you can never be less than 50% of the screen. Sounds arbitrary, does exist.
Yeah.
And if the width and height shrink got you to that, that would be in kind of a problematic scenario. Um, and so it's easier to go to that tempo, but also then, when we think about uh, going back to like kind of my earlier comment, that not having just libraries that are integrated and like doing these things, because it's frankly not going to work or be broadly deployable. But then the flip side of that is we have to find a way to build, measurable accuracy and validation frameworks for that, so that we can build trust of like, okay, that this publisher's actually done this distributor's actually done the implementation correctly within their ecosystem. That becomes a pretty key point. But having more static or more well templatized displays makes that observation and that compliance validation far easier than the variability.
Okay. So we have a standard out there called SIMD. It's Secure Interactive Media Interface Definition. And unfortunately, that requires an HTML environment, which not all TVs support. But with that, what it does is it launches a space for the ad to be executed in, so that's not interacting directly with the player, because that can be a security risk. Um, and it's an API that allows the ad to talk to the player. Okay, I want to shrink to these sizes and do that. Um, it is are people in this group fairly familiar with SIMD? And I see Tasso there, and he had some things to say about that and SIMD and being in an HTML environment. Um, there are things there that are going to need to be updated, I think, in order to support these up and coming ad formats.
Um, So I hear you say you've heard about it, Zach, but I don't know any other, like anyone else in the audience. I know for Tasso it might be super late if he's in his hometown.
It's I'm not, but it's still super late. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can.
All right. Sorry, just had to step out so I can talk. Yeah, Simit. I mean, I think Katie, we had this exchange in Madrid about Simit, and I think my biggest comment or my biggest concern around Simit, with respect to how to deploy it, is really what a couple of the other guys here already mentioned. Is basically it brings a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, it also makes it so tremendously difficult to actually introspect what's happening in the creative, right? Because at the end of the day, as you said, it's basically just an HTML page with some JavaScript attached to it. So if you're now a distributor and you want to send your ads and the publisher receives them, the only effective way to actually see what's going to be visible on screen is to render it, right? There's really no easy way to look at the creative and figure out how is it going to be displayed to your user. And to play devil's advocate here, because I'm German, I know what crazy things people can do. So you could pull a Volkswagen basically, right? So like now you have all this sort of nice validation framework, and the ad, because it's JavaScript, detects that it's being introspected, so it behaves nicely. And the moment it's sort of in the wild, it stops behaving nicely, and you have literally zero control over that, right? And I think this is, at least from my perspective, one of the concerns that I would have with something like Simit, because other than that, it's actually quite nice to integrate and to work with, because you have all of this flexibility. But sort of keeping it under control really is a challenge, I think.
How is that different than from being executed directly in the player? Like, how are we doing this today? Is that happening? Can anyone share? Like, has anyone built functionality for, like, say, an L-shaped ad, proprietarily in the player?
Well, I'm see here in the chat, Matthias is saying they use Simit for nonlinear ads, interactive ads, and it's been very useful for them. Thanks, Matthias. And it's also
Thanks, Juan Pablo. So yeah, Kathy, I cannot really talk about any proprietary implementation, but on our side, we use CMID. Working with our SSAI, it has been great. It has been very useful for any new ad formats. It actually works very well in the flow when we control the SSAI and we have the capacity to put some code on the application. And you mentioned some limitation on some OS. It is true, but like most of OS today also can run HTML5. So we have a critical size to make it relevant for our customers. And I hope more and more players will have a native support of CMID, because I think it will be really, really great to make nonlinear ads and interactive ads more universal today.
Okay, so that's kind of an internet definition with an ad SDK is one way to standardize, like a reference implementation for players.
Yeah, no, for me, it's very similar. We've been working with open measurement since many years, and it's kind of an extension of that for us, right? We've been the SDK has been very useful for us for open measurement. So CMID is kind of a new extension to bring additional functionalities to our customers and bringing the capacity to again do nonlinear and interactive ads. And so yeah, like the reference implementation is will help us, and I just wish like more and more vendors will implement that natively, basically on the player side.
Right. Yeah. We do have a member that we've been working with that has done a little bit of research on CIMID implementation, and in web, in most standard players in web, JD Total ePlayer, they do have CIMID implemented. But it's not so much the case in CTV, in apps that are installed in CTV. It's not as well adopted. And sometimes when it is adopted, the signals about the CIMID support are not there. So back to this idea of signaling what's accepted and what's supported is just missing. So how do we know how to work with that?
Josh, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I was just curious if others here, we're currently looking at a number of server-side options for doing this rendering, like if others have headed down that road, whether it's been successful or not successful in terms of, especially for live, that becomes technically complex, although there's obviously potential benefits.
I mean, to me there, Josh, I think the big concern is, how much you miss out on personalization and so forth if you're doing it at the server side,
Well, I'm
right? But
talking
are you
about
talking about getting
targeted
overlay with
server
Simon?
side.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I meant targeted server side.
Yeah, okay.
So that's essentially kind of operating from the server, displaying on a device.
We had done a project many years ago before Ice Cream Planet was sort of dissolved into Warner Brothers with a company called Transmit Live in partnership with the Yankees, and they had a server-side compositor that would do targeted ads. I believe they could do some amount of targeting of like in the middle of this live stream, I'm going to do a squeeze back, and Zach's going to see a Coke ad, and Dave's going to see a Toyota ad, and you're going to see a supermarket ad or whatever.
Yeah,
And that
go ahead.
sorry. Was that re-encoding or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've seen two kind of implementation server side today. One is exactly what you will do is like you re-encode for each viewer the frame with like the L banner, but of course it's not super scalable, right? So you can do cohort of different ads. We've been seeing that like in some markets. But what I was talking about before, combining SSAI and CMID for me is one of the best way, because like CMID can help us keeping the personalization that SSAI is bringing, and we can just carry on the side basically whatever banner we want for whatever customer. And so of course it needs a little bit of more work on the client side, because you need to be able to support CMID. But as soon as you have done that, then yes, you can deliver nonlinear ads in a personalized way at scale.
Okay, excellent. I know, David, you've been working a lot with SGAI, server guided ad insertion. Do you have any thoughts on how ad formats are either, what would be needed in an environment like that to make this execution easier?
I mean, so if you're not doing it from the server side render, yeah, there's lots of options. And ultimately it's a matter of like, hey, what can you drive from the server but render at the client? And that was, I think, the same comment as the previous one, where great, even with SSAI and CIMID, you can achieve a lot of this where you're actually not rendering the ad or delivering the ad to the SSI, but you can do your personalization through there, and then you're doing your ad overlay at the client, and you can have that intermix. I mean, just directly speaking, yeah, like the biggest issue there is scale. And I've heard of it being successful when there's certain like, regional cohorts, right? So not full DAI, because that's just ridiculous, unless you have very small events, which I know you guys don't. So, when you're doing the region or the sectionalized ones, then you can, and, especially with potential, edge-based stuff going on that you can do for some of the processing, it can be pretty cool what you can achieve now. But, the biggest limitations are scale and workflow on that, as well as, how much time does that potentially take in latency induction. So if in the sports realm, what latency are you working with up front, and how much more is this going to potentially add? Because if you're re-encoding, it takes some time, or a lot of money, or a combination thereof.
Yeah, I mean, when we've looked at it so far, the scale problem has been, can we just do like France sees one ad and Germany sees another ad? We haven't gotten to the point of like everyone's got a unique thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that I don't see why that can't work. It's just a matter of finding the good solution that's going to be doing the actual compositing and encoding in an effective, efficient manner. And once again, what are you up against on your latency, right? And there, I would say a big thing is, what can you do ahead of time? Like the big thing that I see as a way that we have to move, as latency becomes more and more of a focus and so forth, is what can you do to start resolving in this case, compositing and encoding before the actual ad is dropped, right? Or it needs to be inserted because your manifest only has so much runway. What can you do ahead of time to prepare, or even putting stuff in the manifest that says, hey, we have this coming? HLS interest group recently had some good discussions around that. Dash has stuff already. And that's one of the benefits of the SGAI is that there's already kind of mechanisms in there to say, hey, this ad isn't going to be placed just yet, but no, we want you to start preparing it so that when it is inserted, it's ready because that runway has always been one of our challenges, and we ran into that working with you guys at iStream back in the day. Like, great, we only have X amount of time to resolve the ad, and then if it's getting retranscoded because it hasn't been hit before, right? There's all sorts of issues that can happen, and you can miss ad breaks.
And so, SGAI helps with that, because you get the manifest that provides that information up front, or did I misunderstand?
Well, so SGI has and Zach, keep me honest on this one. SGI does have some provisions and elements already in place, especially in Dash, and HLS is also getting on board with it, that you can pre-announce ads saying, hey, there's going to be ad coming in 45 seconds, but it's not yet. But letting you know that, so you can go pre-resolve it. You can do other things around that, especially as like with John's kind of comment around like, hey, if we want to do compositing and so forth, it's a early notification system and preferably getting standardized. HLS is now working on standardizing that further as well. Dash already has that even with the SJI stuff in the V6 side that you can say, hey, this isn't going to be happening, but down the road.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
When you think about SGI versus SAI, even versus CSAI, right? It's all about the composition of the experience and the how early or disjoint you can make that composition happen. SSAI, it's very linear. It's very kind of incrementally bound. SGI is starting to unfold that even more. I would posit, in the future we can hopefully unfold that even more than that. But ultimately, kind of however that resolution happens to then build into that experience, the signaling can be very, very consistent between the different forms. It's just about the amount of flexibility you're giving the underlying systems in the backends to disjoin it from how the client is held, right? Like it gives us the ability, today we've deployed SGI worldwide and VOD and most of the live deployments as well. The way you can really separate load and shed and like all that is really, really nice. You protect the streams, all this stuff, but it gives you a high ability to target and do real-time demand monitoring in ways that SSAI made it a little bit harder, at least in the VOD case.
Okay.
But it really doesn't change the signaling relative to like interactives and whatnot. All that can kind of stay very similar / if not the same between the two.
And
Okay.
Josh, I mean, even with an SSAI solution, I would say look into if you can piggyback onto some of that functionality. And if your system you can do any type of pre-announce that goes in the manifest, then triggers the composition, just knowing even it's just the next ad. Like I don't know exactly when it's gonna get placed, but I know this next one is gonna be one of these kind of cool ones. That's gonna give you guys so much better control and capability.
Right. And so signaling, I know with Scuddy, say, you get a signal that's about, I don't know, around 4 seconds before the ad break. So it seems like if you're doing this with SGAI and you get those instructions at the start of the content, that's a lot more than 4 seconds.
Scuddy has
Right.
provisions for that as well. I think the way they call it pre-roll technically, even though that's like the most confusing thing in the world to use because we think of pre-roll something else maybe.
Yes.
But there is a Scuddy message as well that you can support to say, hey, this is going to be upcoming, but it's not right now.
There's
Oh, okay.
there's also a positive, and won't explain too much for various reasons, but like there's a lot where we've approached this classically from operating a cable head-in, and we have to respond when that cable head-in's ready, right? We need to think less about personalization and connection in that way in the CTV space, and well, even any of the D2C like application space. It's like these things will come together at a point in time, but where they are at that point has no real providence on when you learn about these things. And it's a disjointness of the like how we can start resolve and how we can really think about more macro the experiences that you're trying to build, to remove some of these like arbitrary things like, oh, I need a Scotty message. Do you really? I don't think you do. The Scotty actualizes it, but it's not the thing that you're waiting for.
Right. Okay. So it's more about just bringing that ad into the content and how that happens versus the signal that you get for it.
I mean, the way I see a lot of times the Scuddy stuff is because the encoding packaging systems already have in place, and they continue to use that because that's the mechanism they have to signal that just covers, content and feed from the broadcast and all the other fun stuff, and it just made sense at the time.
Yeah, as everything we do in video, everything comes from a legacy standard. So we have
There's
5
nothing
more
new.
minutes. Yeah, we have 5 more minutes in the discussion. So I don't know if anyone in the audience want to make a question, a comment, any final statement. Maybe a question that we should answer in a future panel. Actually, we didn't have any chance to talk about one of the questions that Alex and Belly posted when we were about to start this discussion. It was like, why are we having all these 4K and HDR and immersive audio experiences, and then we get all these crappy ads without any of those features? So I think there's a lot to discuss about ads, but I'd love the audience to maybe.
And I think that the answer to that is some of this signaling, right? How to classify that ad availability, like this inventory. It's for a 4K unit, and it's a nonlinear, right? Right now, those signals don't exist, so we don't know what the inventory is that is available, and we don't know how to serve it. I think in this last couple of minutes, what are, like, if we were to make a checklist of like, okay, given the conversations we've had, what things do we need to develop? What are the solutions? What do you see being needed? Like updates to Simid to make it easier to implement and use? What have people in the audience or in this group have heard that we need to do moving forward? I know aligning on what signals need to be sent across the board is a big one.
Anyone in the audience that want to speak up? Don't be shy.
Yeah, maybe I can just make one comment about the Simit story. I think that's actually rather interesting, also because of the comments that were made before, where this is like successfully used in production, and I can totally see that, right? My concern is mostly, as I was mentioning earlier, about the complexity, intrinsic complexity behind it, and the rendering capability or how the ad actually looks like in front of an end user, right? And so maybe this is what connects to the signaling where the client and the player needs to be more involved. Because as for instance, if we're talking about connected TVs, on a lot of connected TVs, you only have a single decoder at a time, right? You're in a full HTML environment, but the moment you start using a second video element, bad things happen, right? So that would be an interesting piece of information to send over the wire ahead of time, so that when you send back a CIMID asset, you make sure that it doesn't try to render video, basically, right? Or at least it has some fallback to handle that, maybe introspected there inside the CIMID. Again, adds more complexity. But I think these are maybe the things where the whole flow becomes a little bit smoother, and we can figure out how to render things the way we want them to be rendered, as long as the device has certain capabilities, and then at the same time have some fallbacks in place if those capabilities are not met.
Okay, that's a good point. I think the idea about the signals and the complexity of it need to be distilled down. And I had another thought there, but I'd love to meet up with you separately, Tasso, to talk about how we can make that work better.
Absolutely no problem, Katie.
Okay.
That always happens with Tasso. He's always up for the challenge of having conversation on how to fix a problem.
I would have said come to IBC, but apparently that's not an option. So what can I say?
Yeah.
And I cannot come to Uruguay, guys. You made it 1 week too early. I discussed this already with Nico. It's impossible.
I know, but the other week's gonna be my high video, so it was challenging.
I
Sorry
know,
about that.
and my wife is going to be disappointed one way or another. So what can I do?
So we're kind of running out of time. So just want to thank everyone. It always happens like these. We kick off with the one question, and then the conversation takes us whatever the conversation wants to take us. I think there's been a huge interest in the audience from Dan, Matthias, Tasso, Nico, George. So thank you all so much. Sorry if I missed someone, and thank you also Zach, David, Connie, Peter, and of course thank you Katie, because I think this is the way we can shape this industry together and collaborating. So thank you all so much, and remember to submit your ideas for the summer projects. I'm gonna send the link to the chat once again. And we'll hope to see many of you soon, IBC, in 3 weeks. And see you in our next Mata Talk, which I think it's after IBC.
Thank you, Juan.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me. It was great to talk to everyone today.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.